Hi, everyone. My name is Sean Sweeney. I am the Director of Education and Special Programs at the Center for Nonprofit Advancement. Thanks so much for joining us today. The Center is excited to have wrapped up our Board Leadership Award process just a few weeks ago, and we're excited to announce that our winner for this year is Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, ISPU, and our honorable mention this year is Food and Friends. We're excited to be joined by both organizations today to talk about fundraising. This video is just one in a series of 4 videos that will be released documenting best practices learned throughout the process. So we'll have fundraising today, and we also have selecting an executive director, building your board, and evolution of mission and strategic leadership. So please keep an eye out for all 4 of them. So again, thank you so much for joining. And with that, I will hand things over to Ann Schranz from Cohn-Resnick.
Great, thank you so much, Sean. My name is Ann Schranz. I'm an audit partner with Cohn-Resnick. We're a national audit and accounting firm specializing in not-for-profit organizations, and we've been the sponsor of the award from inception. And when we met with the center to talk about how we could contribute and give back to the organization, probably close to about 8 or 9 years ago now, board governance and best practices in board governance was something that the center was very interested in, and obviously as auditors, something that we're very interested in as well. So the process has been fantastic. So I want to thank Sean and the entire team at the center for all of their great work with this. And before I pass it over to Kevin, I want to thank the selection committee for all of their hard work. They really are the heart and soul of this process, and so we really appreciate all of their time. And I want to add my congratulations to ISPU and Food and Friends. We're just very impressed with your organizations and with the board and with everyone we interacted with. So again, thank you for your time and thank you for participating. And we look forward to hearing all the great things that you have to share with us today. So.
Excellent. My name is Kevin Hinton. I will serve as the moderator for today's panel conversation. I am the CEO and Executive Director of Beacon House, an after-school education and youth development organization serving children and families in Northeast Washington, D.C.'s Edgewood neighborhood. And I am also completing my 2nd year as a member of the Board Leadership Award Selection Committee. So I'm thrilled to be here today. I'd like to have our 2 panelists, Colleen Ezzeddine and Rick Stamberger, introduce themselves briefly before we get started.
Hi, I'm Colleen Ezzeddine. Thank you for having us here today, and congratulations to Food and Friends as well. I am on the board of ISPU, the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, and I've been serving as the chair of the development committee for the past couple of years now as well. And so I really look forward to talking with you all about the role of fundraising and how we engage our board.
I'm Rick Stamberger. I've been on the board at Food and Friends for, I think, probably close to 10 years now. That's one number I should have checked before I got here. I'm the head of the development committee, as Colleen is at ISPU. And looking forward to talking about Food and Friends and the mission and how the fundraising efforts have supported the mission over the years.
Excellent. Thank you, Colleen. Thank you, Rick. Now I'd like to dive right in on the questions. First of all, I'd like to ask the 2 of you, just for context purposes, to please provide a brief overview of your organization's mission, major programmatic activities, annual expense budget and size, and major sources of revenue. And if we can start with Colleen, that would be great.
Thank you. ISPU, when said quickly, it sounds like a mouthful. Institute for Social Policy and Understanding. And what we do is we're a research think tank. And if that makes your eyes glaze over, I can try to make it a little more real and give you something more concrete to think about. Those of us at ISPU and those who support our work, we envision in America where American Muslims are a thriving and active population within our country. And we believe that in order to do that, we need to lay a foundation of facts and really make sure that decision makers, educators, journalists, the general public, all have the up-to-date and accurate information about American Muslims and who they are and what they believe in and how they're active in this country. And we do that by conducting research and disseminating that information in ways that the general public can understand it and make sense of it. Our annual expense budget is just under $1.5 million. Major source of revenue. We get a lot of grants and from foundations and organizations, but also a large majority coming from individual donors who support our work.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Rick?
So Food and Friends began a number of years ago in the basement of a church in Washington, D.C. to feed people with HIV and AIDS. And over the years, the organization has transformed itself as AIDS changed and as the need to feed people continued to stay the same and in fact grow. And so our mission has continued to grow. And our objective is basically to provide nutrition to people who are chronically ill as a part of their, really as food is nutrition as medicine, an effort to keep them healthy, to get them healthy. We serve about 1 million meals a year. We have an operating budget of just around $12 million. And the funding comes from a number of different sources. We are fortunate to have funding from the federal government through Ryan White. In particular, we have funding from the district and from the state of Maryland, both of them, and a bit from Virginia. Because we have a radius of service that goes far beyond the District of Columbia. I mean, we go out through Montgomery County into Prince George's County, almost all the way to Baltimore. So we cover a fair amount of territory. And we have funding from generous donors, foundation donors. As Colleen has mentioned, we have a number of local foundations in particular, corporations, and then an awful lot of individual donors, the board level, and then donors through our programs. Typically, we would have had a Chef's Best event this year. It was canceled because of COVID. And we have an active direct marketing campaign as well.
Excellent. Thanks to both of you for those overviews. Now, if you could now discuss the different ways that directors at your organizations engage in fund development, be that by cultivating and soliciting new donors, stewarding existing donors, hosting or participation in events. If you could just talk a little bit about how that happens at your organizations. And if we could go with Colleen again, that would be great.
Well, Kevin, you basically covered a few of the major ways that we engage directors. So all of the above and any which way more plus that we can think of. And we actually offer our board members a menu of options to choose from, so they can find the way to contribute to development in ways that fit their time constraints, their personality, and their comfort level. I think fundraising and development is not something we shy away from. It's everybody's job. You know, everyone needs to understand it. I think a big part of that is by dispelling some of the fear and anxiety. You know, how many times have we all heard board members say, oh, I'm not going to ask for money, or I hate asking for money. And there's so much more to it than that. So we really engage everyone in the process with all the things that Kevin just mentioned and more. We've had some you know, actual role playing with different ways of conversing with donors that we will do during our annual retreats. We have a development committee, of course, and I like to say that a lot of times it's not rocket science. It's just really being deliberate in your planning and in your follow-up. And I think our development committee and our staff work really closely together to make sure that none of the balls get dropped. It's, as you know, increasingly complicated and detail-oriented, and it's just nice to work hand in hand with the staff to make sure that we're taking advantage of every opportunity there is to bring more people into the ISPU community of supporters.
I think Colleen probably hit a number of the issues already for Food and Friends. I mean, we have a board of about 20 people at any one time, and engagement around funding starts at the beginning, where we have what we so nicely call a give and get discussion with a prospective board member, and that encourages the understanding, I think, at the outset that we look forward to having an investment, not based on a necessarily a completely fixed number. It's to each according to her or his means, but we do expect people to give and also to get, and so there is a need to provide training development for the board members. Role playing is a great example of that. I think that's a tremendous idea for them to be able to go out and ask. There are other ways that the board is involved. We have a number of board members who have had leadership positions with our events as really their first entree into the company, or into the nonprofit, into the organization. So one of our, actually 2 or 3 of our board members now were co-chairs of the Chef's Best event in prior years, and that's about $1 million event. So that in and of itself is a fairly significant fundraising activity. We also have board members who have relationships with the local and state government officials, and we're not shy about calling on them to help, and prior board members also, who can help when things might get bogged down with one of the funding agencies. And finally, I think, much as Colleen and I are involved here, we have board members who are more than willing to go with our staff, the full-time team, to meet with foundations, to meet with corporations, to identify new corporations, and make sure that as a board we have representation that does include people who are able to give significantly or get significantly, because you do need a few of them on a board to be able to make it happen.
Excellent. You both mentioned staff in your comments, and I'd like to hear just a little bit about the roles that the executive directors of the organizations that you lead and other staff play in supporting the participation of your directors in fundraising.
Well, it's very hand in hand. I'm constantly inspired by our director and our staff and the role they play. When we have a peer-to-peer fundraising campaign through different platforms or social media, our director and staff are right there with us, sharing their own most heartfelt experiences with our organization and its mission. I'm very inspired by that. They seem to really live our mission. It's not just a job for them. So that's one way. Let's see, I talked earlier about just keeping track of things and all the stages of bringing a new friend to the organization through the prospect and that whole process. We're very methodical with how we think about ways to keep them up to date about our organization. I've been impressed by their detailed communication plans that they have, that they share with us, that we work on kind of tag teaming, how we pass the different steps of that onto each other. We introduce them to people we know, they introduce us to people. So it's and the pandemic hasn't really stopped that. We're still meeting people virtually, and we're really trying to keep things moving forward. It's speaking of the pandemic, it's been a great time for the staff, the director, and us as board members to really stay connected with all of our supporters and to really have touch points with them at all different levels of giving. It's been a great way to touch base with them, ask them how they're doing, connect on a human level, and you know, keep them informed of what we're doing to keep our work going during this time.
Excellent. And Rick, I saw you nodding your head when Colleen started talking about staying connected during this pandemic. If you could talk also about the role of staff in supporting you and your fellow directors, and speak to this pandemic aspect of the work as well.
Sure. You know, Carrie Stolfus, our executive director, and Carolyn Schmidt, our head of development, director of development, and really the entire team make it easy to be a board member for Food and Friends. And as I mentioned to Kevin earlier, I'm not sure I'm the best board member, quite frankly, for nonprofits, but they make me look good, and they make it easy to serve. If I'm going out to ask for money, they've given me a package that lets me know all the information I need to know to be able to do the job. And you know, as Colleen said earlier, people aren't comfortable typically asking for money, and so you have to make it as easy as possible, right? And show that in fact these people have most likely given before, and that they are committed to the cause. They understand what the mission is, and so you're really doing them a favor in a lot of ways to give them an opportunity to support something that's important to them. And so they're very involved. Carolyn has a great team. They're able to provide all the information that I need to be able to make those asks. In terms of the requests to the board and to the city and state governments, the team is very involved. I mean, obviously, we got a $12 million budget, so it's a significant operation and requires a lot of work in terms of whether it's authorizations with Ryan White or with funding through other programs. There are a lot of regulations and paperwork that we need to make sure we have, and then we have to have the relationships to be able to keep that going. I think you mentioned COVID. I think anybody who was on a nonprofit board when the shutdown occurred thought this is going to be a slog. It's going to take what was a great year and turn it into a terrible year. And I think I certainly had that sense that we were going to really have to amplify and accentuate other things as we got into this. We knew we had made the decision not to have Chef's Fest, and then we canceled all in-person events for the year. The development team and Carrie increased communication about what was going on, how the organization was still running, how we were still serving meals, how we were still distributing and delivering the meals in a COVID world. The one thing that took a hit is the volunteer program, and we have a great program where we have thousands of people coming through Food and Friends every year, as whether it's a corporate group, an individual, a family around Thanksgiving, college, university, fraternity, sorority. We have lots of groups, and we welcome them when we don't have a pandemic. And so we did have to take that into account and reorganize a bit. But you know, we've been really blessed, quite frankly, in to me, an amazing way, that our mission is particularly important in this time period. I mean, we're dealing with immunocompromised people who need to eat and can't get out. So I think more than anything that we could have done, that message was, I guess, pitch perfect for a lot of donors, individual donors in particular. So we've been very fortunate from that standpoint.
That's excellent. And thank you so much. Now, Colleen, I have a question that's very specific to ISPU. A few years ago, ISPU determined that its founding board did not possess the fundraising capacity that the organization thought it would need to move forward in the way that it was seeking to move forward. So if you could talk a little bit about what led the organization to that realization, and really talk about the steps that ISPU took to basically build its capacity to achieve its fundraising objectives. And if you could tell us where things stand today with that, that would be great.
Oh, sure. You know, a lot of this I've just heard and have learned since joining the board just, 2 or 3 years ago. We've had a remarkable, dedicated group of founding board members. And would you believe now, 18 years later, not one of them remains on the board, but they're still very actively involved in the organization. But what they found was that 3 years ago, we lost 1/4 of our funding when a major source of unrestricted funding literally disappeared overnight. Now, we weren't the only organization that was impacted by this donor, but that really was not any solace to us. We really had to deal with it. I mean, we're talking about $350,000 a year, each year for 3 years, about 1/4 of our budget. And to be honest, I remember my very first board meeting, and that was the topic of conversation at that board meeting. And I felt like, the rug had been pulled out from under us. And so little did I know is that the executive director and the board had already started discussing this and had already built a plan. So over the last 3 years, what they've done is they've revamped the development committee and made it extremely hands-on. We've brought in a new development director. They have very consciously looked at the skill set of our board and determined which additional skills were still needed. We ended up looking to individuals who teach at schools of philanthropy and whose profession is philanthropy. We've leveraged our board members with who already have philanthropy expertise in other board service that they're on. We've really made fundraising and development a cornerstone of every board member's experience. Now, it sounds like a wonderful story, and oh, that sounds great. But it's a constant reevaluation of what's happening. People are people, and people's lives get busy. People's circumstances change. I think we've all been in that situation, but we've really we keep at it, and we look for ways to engage everyone that best fits their circumstances. We've had some great success already this year. At the beginning of the year, we had a wonderful experience with fundraising during Ramadan, and we hit record numbers of donations. That way, even though the entire month of Ramadan was, during pretty much a shutdown period for most of the country. So we keep at it, and we keep in communication, and we've had some great new board members join us recently that are giving us some fresh ideas, and we're looking forward to having our first major virtual banquet this fall, like I'm sure many other organizations are as well.
Excellent, excellent. And congratulations to you all on your success in overcoming that significant hurdle.
Thank you.
Now, Rick, I'd like to turn to you because the Board Leadership Award was particularly impressed with the success that Food and Friends has had with the implementation of the give and get policy that you referenced briefly in your comments. So if you could just talk a little bit more about that policy and how and why the board has implemented it. And if you talk about the factors that have enabled you and your colleagues to implement it with such great effect, and how you've been able to motivate your directors to participate so enthusiastically.
You know, the give or get policy, I think, has been in some form around Food and Friends since inception, and it probably was a critical funding source at the outset when they absolutely needed funds and they needed them quickly. And I suspect that a lot of corporations weren't funding AIDS organizations, and there probably wasn't a lot of federal funding for those types of things, for that for services in that area. So I think we've always had that in the DNA of the organization. And if you think back on the founding of the organization, we had significant involvement representation, as we still do, from the LGBTQ community, and this was an issue that was obviously first and foremost an issue for that community, and so they were invested, right? And I think that it just continued to make sense, and it continues to make sense to keep board members invested in the mission and the vision of the organization, and it pays a number of dividends, no pun intended. First of all, you do have a budgetable number, a number against which you can forecast as a start. And though we have 20 board members, it's not an insignificant portion of the individual donor base for the organization from a dollar standpoint. So you're able to have, from the get-go, the knowledge that you're fairly certain to get those funds in the door. I think the second key point is that foundations and other donors want to know that the board is invested. And so we want 100% participation from the board. That's more important than what the dollar amounts are. We want to be sure that they are committed to the organization at least enough to make a donation, and to ideally to go out and get a donation, get support for the organization. And I think that, as I said, the foundations want that as well. You know, the way that it's worked is that it's not particularly hard to ask board members for donation for the organization, support for the organization. The mission's very clear. The organization does well. We deliver something that is of value, and we have a lot of feedback on the value of that, of the food, of the service to our clients, and we found other ways to raise money that don't leave the entire onus on individual donors. So they feel like they're part of the organization. And obviously it's more important to have 100% of the team, the board team, contributing than really anything else. Excellent.
And so I'm curious about what advice you'd have.
Yeah, I think it's it's really pretty easy to do it. I think that, again, it's not the amount necessarily, it's the act. And so we don't, while we have a fairly high threshold for individual contributions on the board, we make allowances, and we take into account individuals' other assets and contributions that they bring to the table. So that, it's not, oh my goodness, you didn't raise $2,000 this year, you're off the board. There are other things. And so I think it really should be, and I'm speaking personally on this, but I can't imagine being on a board where I wouldn't be asked for money. I mean, it's just hard for me to think about that in this day and age.
And it sounds like that commitment is the key more than anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you want to have people on the board who are committed to the mission in some way, shape, or form. Now, obviously, there are some organizations that have 100% of their funding from foundations or from the government or whatever else. So I won't speak to that. But in terms of nonprofits, not-for-profits, where individual donations, individual support is important, I think the board has to be the lead on this.
Excellent, excellent. We're in the home stretch here. I have one final question for the both of you. What advice would you give to boards with directors who desire to increase their engagement with fundraising, but aren't sure what immediate steps they should take in order to move towards that goal?
Well, when I joined the board of ISPU, and I went to my first few meetings and then went to our first retreat, I was amazed at the interesting dialogue and conversations that we had over that 3-day retreat. And I genuinely liked these other people I was on the board with. And to be honest, I don't know how they've achieved that. They're just great people that I enjoy talking to and working with. And because of that, we're able to have really open lines of communication. So if an organization is wondering, how do I take the next step to get our board more engaged in fundraising, I would start by taking a real honest look at how the board is functioning as a whole, how they are communicating. Are there open lines of communication, or is development and fundraising like a taboo subject in the room? So because we have this type of camaraderie and openness, and I think we're being very deliberate and thorough in bringing in new board members. Everyone's involved in talking with prospective members and being open about what's expected. So far so good. We have a great board, this year and hopefully in the next few years. But I think it's because our executive director and the staff, as much as they keep us on task and, we're efficient in what we do when we get together, they also really take the time to allow us all to get to know one another. I think that really goes a long way. And I think if you have that open and honest communication and you're clear about expectations up front and there are no surprises, it can be quite helpful. And, there's a role for everyone to play in development. And whether you're an introvert, an extrovert, whether you have a big network of friends or whether you have a smaller network, there are so many things that a board member can do throughout that process. And it's just about, working with people to find the thing that works for them.
Excellent. What would you add?
Well, first of all, I want to add my congratulations to Colleen and ISPU and say that I've been taking notes during this conversation. So I'm going to steal some ideas from you on how to accelerate what we're already doing, and thank the Center for this conversation. This has been great. I second everything that Colleen said in terms of the communication and the involvement of the professional team at a nonprofit. I think that with greater knowledge by the director, the development director, if there is one, of the individual strengths of the board, they should ask. They should just ask. I think it's the easiest way to get somebody involved in fundraising is to get them involved in fundraising and make it as easy as possible. Have them show up for a meeting where they don't have to make the ask, where they can watch the process, where they can see what it's like, and find out that you can live through it, you will survive, and the worst thing that somebody can say is no, and that's about that's the biggest pain that you can possibly have. I also agree that the engagement, the interaction, the familiarity, friendships that develop on the board are important from that standpoint. I can ask somebody who I've known now for 4 or 5 years for support on the board, for instance, which we've done for extraordinary gifts. I'll be asking for those and multi-year gifts. I have absolutely no problem doing it because we've had that experience. We've had the camaraderie, we have the communication, we know the value of the organization. And I think probably the third and final point is the passion of the professional team goes a long way here. I mean, we know what we're doing matters to our clients, and yet we're seeing it one day a month. We're volunteering, perhaps. We're certainly at board meetings, but we live that. We get the emotional juice out of it, which is important in development from the staff, from the team. And we're fortunate. We have, I think, from the drivers to the kitchen to the executive director, we have people who absolutely live the mission and care about it. And that makes it a lot easier to get everybody involved.
Excellent. Colleen, Rick, I'd like to thank both of you and congratulate your organizations again on your accomplishment this year with respect to the Board Leadership Award. And now I'd like to turn things over to Sean to close us out.
Great, thanks so much, Kevin. And just to echo what Kevin just said, thank you to Colleen and Rick for joining, and congrats again to your organizations for being our finalist, winner, and honorable mention in the Board Leadership Award process this year. Kevin, thank you so much for moderating this conversation. That's it for us today. We really appreciate everyone tuning in to watch. Like I said, this is only one of 4 videos, so make sure you keep an eye out for the other 3. And otherwise, thanks so much and enjoy the rest of your day.